has been constant for some time, the mind becomes very quiet and so does the body. Every single moment of concentration is a moment of purification. The defilements that beset us, causing our unhappiness and difficulties, are momentarily laid aside. The more often we lay them aside, the less habitual they become. The more often we can concentrate, the more often we are without them. Having a pure, bright mind then becomes our second nature.
Concentration starts out with the experience of pleasant feelings. These pleasant feelings arise because the mind at that stage is untroubled. This indicates clearly that if one were untroubled and had a pure, bright mind at all times, one would constantly have pleasant feelings. Here we get an indication of what is possible, which makes us want this state more often. This desire for the wholesome and beneficial will eventually bring us to the point of no desire, finally eliminating all dissatisfaction.
Concentration starting out with pleasant feelings goes on to the next stage, where there's happiness. Again, this is a clear indication that the pure mind knows only happiness. If there's unhappiness, there's impurity. The two go together. A happy person doesn't gain joy through sensual desires, because they know how elusive such joys are. A truly happy person is someone who is joyfully independent of outer conditions. Such a person can concentrate and thereby find a home for the mind where it can be totally at ease. But also that person has achieved purification to the point where unhappiness no longer arises. Unhappiness is caused by defilements. When unhappiness arises, we can investigate its cause, and invariably we will find an underlying defilement. If we don't find that, we haven't investigated well enough.
In the concentrated states, the mind lets go of the 5 hindrances. When pleasant feelings and happiness have arisen, peacefulness and equanimity follow. Equanimity results in a feeling of having no desire left. Sometimes people even think that they have become permanently desireless, which is, of course, a misconception. But at least for that moment there's no desire. That in itself is a very valuable experience inasmuch as one gets to know a state of no desire. It's utter bliss, the only bliss worth having. When one experiences it, then one knows what one is striving for. One isn't striving to get anything. One is striving to get rid of everything. This is an interesting misconception in most people's minds. When one first starts meditating, one hopes to get peace, happiness, and bliss, some of which may actually arise, but only if one has let go of something else. Namely, one has to let go of some of one's ego supports and most of one's desires.
When the bliss of no desire is experienced momentarily, we know that's what we really want. But we have to see clearly that it isn't the bliss, as such, but the cause for it that needs cultivating. That means renunciation, giving up. Without renunciation, life is a constant striving for something. Renunciation is the answer to all kinds of achievement syndromes, not just in the material world, but even in the spiritual world. Trying to achieve something in the spiritual world is just as foolish as trying to achieve something in the material world. There's nothing to achieve. There's only letting go. As we let go, more and more, of ego identifications, desires, and support systems, bliss will arise.
Happiness that arises through concentration is based upon purity. A similar happiness can be experienced in one's daily life if purity has been cultivated. In the meditative practice, pleasant feelings, happiness, and equanimity become deeper and more profound than in daily living, but unless one has already attained some purity in one's ordinary life, one won't be able to do it in meditation either. Daily living and meditation go hand in hand. The harder it is to get a pleasant feeling in meditation, the more purification one needs to practice. There's no blame attached to any of this. These are just states of development.
Happiness of concentration is often considered to be the ultimate achievement anyone can have. That's a misconception because such happiness too is impermanent and not independent, nor unconditioned. It's conditioned by many factors, that there is a certain amount of quiet around one, that the body is still in a fair condition so that it can sit still, and that one can concentrate. Although this kind of happiness is independent of outer conditions entering through the senses, it's dependent upon the inner condition of mind and body. It cannot be the greatest happiness yet.
The happiness of insight. The greatest happiness, the fourth stage, is the happiness of insight. This is irreversible. Insight, in Buddhist terminology, is always directed toward impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and non-self, either one of the three or all three. If one sees one of the three characteristics clearly, then one knows all of them because they are totally interconnected. The happiness and bliss of total insight means that one has shed the burden of ego delusion. When one can let go of that, the relief and release is immense.
Ramana Maharshi, who was a sage in southern India, compared ego delusion to people taking a train journey. They enter the train and stand in the aisle holding on to their luggage instead of putting it in the luggage rack and letting the train carry it. Like this, we carry the burden of ego around with us when we need not. Ego delusion makes everything seem to be threatening or attacking us, or occasionally defending us, difficult to master, an obstacle, like a mountain that has to be climbed. It can make life look quite difficult.
Defilements are either wanting or hating, being without energy, or being worried, anxious, resisting, or defending one's own viewpoint. But when one lives quite free from any view, is virtuous with perfect insight, that's a description of an arahant. Our own viewpoints are our downfall. The minute we start defending them, we can be sure that we are only defending ego. The defense of a viewpoint is an indication that it is not based on experience. Experience needs no defense. The Buddha's teaching is experiential. Viewpoints are based on ego. None of them are absolute truth.
Insight into the constant flux and flow of all phenomena, including ourselves, brings the understanding that there's nothing in this world worth keeping, worth holding on to. Insight releases one from that resistance to other people's viewpoints that can make life so immensely difficult. Other people have other viewpoints. The only answer to that is, may they live long and happily. Attachment to one's own viewpoint only shows that one hasn't yet grasped impermanence. When one sees constant change in everything, so that one can never really say, I am this, then a first breakthrough into depth perception happens. Which one am I?
Am I the one sitting here who had a good meditation yesterday, or the one who had a lot of distractions today, or the one who's angry, or the one who's resisting, or the one who's accepting and devoted? Which one? If I'm all of those, what a conglomeration of people I am. I must be a whole tribe of people instead of just one. So either I'm none or I'm all of them. We'll have to make a choice. If we don't want to be none, then, of course, we choose to be all of them. Then we have to imagine that there are at least 1 million different people in oneself. That's not an exaggeration, because by this time in our lives we must have had 1 million different ideas, feelings, viewpoints, reactions over the years, in this lifetime alone. If we choose to be that many different people, life becomes even more complicated than if we were none of them. How about choosing to be none of them?
This insight is very threatening to our ego concept. Why is that? Because I want to be. To be what? To be whom? To be where? For what reason? All our viewpoints, conditioned through our thinking processes. The happiness that arises when one lets go of all that, is the happiness that is embedded in acceptance and peacefulness. Nothing needs to be achieved, accomplished, or changed. All is as it is.
The 4 stages of happiness that start with sensual desire and lead through into insight are a continual purification process. The only way any of this can be verified is through our own experience. For that, our own inner work has to have priority. There are no holidays when doing that work, whether we are at the beach or in the meditation hall, driving a car, or flying in an airplane. There's no respite. In order to graduate from sensual desire, we can put our attention on service to others. That means on love and compassion. Service to others means forgetting self. When one gives service to others, it doesn't matter whether one is helping them to wash their feet or helping them to meditate. There's no difference. Love is service, service is love. Concentration is supported by the lovingness in one's heart. One of the 11 benefits of loving kindness is that the mind is quickly concentrated.
Concentration must not be considered the goal and the end. It is only the means. It is the means for cultivating a mind that is able to penetrate reality. There are two kinds of reality, relative and absolute. Everyone knows relative reality. There we find woman and man, young and old, poor and rich, stupid and intelligent. There are animals, trees, flowers, stars, moon, and heaven, and all are judged, whether they make me happy. In absolute reality, there's none of that. There are physical manifestations of mind-made objects. That's all. There isn't a single me nor a single you. Nothing, just manifestations that are constantly changing. Even the universe is constantly changing, contracting and expanding. And so are we.
The mind that has become concentrated, happy, and peaceful is a mind that can accept this constantly changing universe and use it for its own benefit. The mind that is not peaceful rejects such reality out of hand and says, "But I want to be happy." That's the mind of most people in the world. The mind that doesn't need any outer conditions for happiness is the mind that can say, "This is the release from all suffering. This is true happiness." Such a mind sees with clarity the absolute reality of what's happening in this universe and doesn't have to hang on to anything, attach to anything, doesn't have to become anything, doesn't have to be anything. It just does what is necessary at each particular moment and then lets go. The happiness of insight is not exhilaration or elation. It's the sort of happiness that has peacefulness as its base and a lack of desire, striving, and delusion as its result. When delusion is gone, the pure, bright mind knows only that which is real.